All right, welcome to another episode of Money and More with me, your host. This week, we're going to be talking about something that I've been involved in for this is probably going on about a year now, or coming up a year. And if you've been paying attention to the YouTube channel and the Instagram and some of the live streams I've done, you know that this has been an ongoing effort. The fight to try and get financial education as a compulsory part of the primary school curriculum in the UK. A lot of work, a lot of effort has gone into this, and I've just played a very, very small part to the entire effort. And who I do have as a guest on today's episode is really the person who's kind of been the front runner to try and make this something that actually becomes a reality in the future. There's quite a lot to discuss, really, to be honest. And if you've been following, I'm sure that you'll be interested to know what's going on, where we are, and ultimately where we need to be next. So I have the pleasure of introducing Louise Hill, who is the co-founder and CEO of GoHenry. Louise, thank you so much for being
Peter,
here.
thank you for having me. And you do yourself down saying you've only played a small part in this.
Well, look, I appreciate you guys just, reaching out to me and asking me to be part of it, really. This is something I'm quite passionate about. But if I look at the scale of the work, you guys really have led the bulk of it in terms of all the research, and we'll talk about that earlier today. So just to be included in the conversation and be able to add my point of view and be part of it, for me, it's been a really, really big thing. So really, I should be saying thank you to you. On that note, I would love to because I think one of the comments that I got on Instagram a couple of weeks ago was, why are companies the ones that are leading this conversation and trying to make this compulsory? And I think amongst the general public, I think there is this whole thing that government should be the one to lead it. I really don't understand where they think it should come from. But what I'm really, really interested in is why, as GoHenry, have you kind of looked at this and said, this is something we definitely need to change?
That's a really good question, and neatly put too. I think for me, fundamentally, as GoHenry, financial education is at the heart of everything we do. It's the reason the company was formed. It's the reason I came together with a couple of other founders. Gosh, it is over 12 years ago now to build GoHenry, because we were trying to figure out how to build something that would let parents teach their kids about money in a practical way. And we set out our stall, we set out our mission statement. It's not changed for probably 5 years now. It is to make every kid smart with money. And that word every was very, very deliberately selected. We offer a paid for service. We're very, very well known in the UK. We operate now across 5 different countries, the US, France, Spain, and Italy as well. But we know we don't reach everybody. And if we truly believe, which we do, that we want to make every kid smart with money and that every child has the right to grow up with the life skills of being confident with money, then we should be stepping outside of just the GoHenry service and trying to call for that to happen and trying to call for actions to be taken that would allow every child in the UK to grow up confident with money.
Yeah, I think that the inclusion of every is really, really important because I think we've had this conversation before. When you look at the different socio-economic groups, there are certain people that maybe will be able to afford a pay to access information where others actually can't. And if you really wanted to touch on every single child, you have to go to the source where all of them go to. All of them go to school. So it's almost like a logical progression to say, actually, we need to lobby government, we need to influence government to make the change in the education system to equip them to a certain extent. It's really, really interesting because I know that when we first kind of like started speaking, there was a piece of research that kind of backed up the fact that if we teach kids about money, better financial choices and decisions are actually beneficial to the economy and to the wider picture. I think sometimes that is kind of lost in the perception of this conversation because there is a narrative that the government will never change this because they do want to keep everyone kind of where they are right now. And Love to get
Well,
your view on that.
you have to hope that that's not the case. No, I really don't think that's the case. But you're absolutely right about that research. We did some research with development economics um, back in 2021 because we were really interested in understanding better the impact of financial education, and we found that nearly half of adults who didn't receive any financial education at all were earning £15,000 or less per year. And a stat that shocked me: 40% of adults who hadn't received financial education had no savings at all. So nothing, no emergency savings, nothing to cover that, that horrible moment when your car breaks down or your boiler blows up.
Hmm.
And um, that's pretty terrifying. But then on a positive side, it showed that um, people who had received financial education at an early age had an average of £70,000 more in their pension pots than those who didn't. And also, they were much, much more likely to start a business. And we extrapolated those figures. If it could lead to over 75,000 businesses being formed in the UK every year, which would equate to an additional 123,000 jobs, which would reduce unemployment by 8% and inject an extra £7 billion into the UK economy every year. It's the figures are phenomenal, and
Mm.
the the rationale for starting young. Um, Gosh, this is a survey that a piece of research that I've quoted so many times. But there's a great study that was done by Cambridge University several years ago now that shows that money habits in young people start to be formed
Locks in at
from
age
the age
7.
of 7,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yep.
yet there is
Yep.
no statutory requirement currently to teach financial education in primary schools in England. And that simply means that we're leaving our kids behind. And
Yeah.
I definitely want GoHenry and me personally to be a voice in trying to change that.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what drew me to kind of like participate in this. And I mentioned that same stat in my book actually. It's the idea that knowing something early on, just having a seed planted earlier on, it's it's a weird thing because I think when you look at the human brain, there are so many things that we take in and they get compartmentalized. And I'm a firm believer that even if I look at my own experience, that if someone had kind of taught me when I was much, much younger that a pension is this, or a savings account does this, or this is how investing works, when I got to the point where perhaps it became important for me to recall that information, I would have done. But the simple fact is, for most of us, no seeds are being planted at all. So as adults, we kind of go through this cycle of trial and error when it comes to interact with money. We make expensive mistakes here and there, and it doesn't have to be like that, especially in the way that the world is developing right now. I think we have a generation of kids who are in school right now who will be facing challenges that no generation has ever faced before. You know, robots possibly taking their jobs. You know, these are huge issues. The workplace has transformed quite significantly. Gone are the days where you can have a defined benefit pension, you know, a job for life, if you will. That that's gone. The
Yeah.
responsibility is now on them to make sure that they can provide their own pension provisions in planning for retirement. So I think these are all topics that are important in some way, shape, or form for the seed to be planted early. So at least there's this, I guess, this germination of an idea that, oh, by the way, I'm sure I learned this when I was, 8 years old or whatever it might be. And you can recall on that information to actually take action when needed.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And if we can embed those that confidence, that practice, that the theory and the practical side of learning about money at a young age, then we can really make a difference to the confidence that kids leave school with and emerge into the world of adult financial services. And I think, one of the things um, I've often been asked in the last 10 years of running GoHenry and being part of GoHenry and what we're trying to do here. Um, People say, but isn't it much better when kids learn with coins and money in their piggy bank? And my answer to that is that that's not the world we're living in today. It
Not anymore.
simply
Yeah.
isn't. We know kids need to learn how to handle money in the way that they will use it when they're adults, and the reality
Hmm.
is that will mostly be cashless. We know from
Yeah.
our own data that only 10% of 16 I can't speak, only 10% of 6 to 18-year-olds are actually spending in cash. So it isn't counting coins in a piggy bank. Kids need to understand how money works when they can't physically see it. Whether that's buying things
Mm.
online, transferring money to friends, using banking apps. Um, and what's interesting, I think, from our perspective, is kids are realizing that this more and more for themselves. We're always talking to our customers, and we recently conducted some research that showed 42% of primary school children are worried about leaving school without money skills. And yeah, I mean
Really?
that's phenomenal. So the awareness is there and the hunger to learn it is there. And that's why this is so important. When they were asked what topics they would most like to learn about in school, one of the most popular that came through in the questionnaire was how to use a bank account. So over
Okay.
over 30% of them chose that as the most popular. What would they like to learn about as regards money in school? And the fact that they feel they already want to learn about something that you would think was incredibly simple, maybe as adults, because we've muddled our way through and figured out how to use a bank account. But
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
demonstrates that financial literacy needs to incorporate more digital elements, starting with the absolute basics of how do you use a bank account online, because that's what we all do.
I find that really fascinating because I don't know that I would have. If someone surveyed me when I was that age, I don't know if I would have said money is would be one of the things that I would want to learn about. Where do you think that's come from? Do you think that maybe there's been some kind of influence in the fact that we have had COVID and we've had, you know, pretty turbulent last
Mhm.
3 years at least? Do you think that might have influenced things a little bit?
I think you're right. I think there's been two things that have kind of followed in very close succession. One is COVID and the pandemic, which we know catapulted forward the cashless society, catapulted forward
Hmm.
shopping online and using online tools. And then followed very swiftly behind that has been the cost of living crisis. And,
Hmm.
like it or not, kids hear about that because it's there, it's on their television screens, it's on their phones. Um, Parents are talking about it at home. And I think that means money in all its forms has become a more inherent part of day to day life and certainly at home life. And I think that's probably driven some of that awareness in younger kids. And the important thing really is that we help them understand and not fear, um, give them the tools, give provide parents with the tools to help parents teach their kids about money and talk about it in an open way. A very long while ago when I was trying to raise money to start this business, um, I had a pitch deck where I would go and talk to potential investors, and I used to say, well, I want to talk to you about that thing that no British person wants to talk about. And then the next slide, of course, said sex with a great big cross through it. And I'm just like, no, not sex. The other one nobody likes to talk about, money. And it's true, a lot of people have a reticence about talking about money in the home. And actually, if you can talk about money to your kids in a positive way and trigger conversations, whether it's at the supermarket between which brand of beans you buy, or the difference between a takeaway on a Friday night versus what's it become called, a fake away, where you do it yourselves at home. You
Hmm.
can have a lot of fun with kids with that, in an age appropriate way, but actually you're teaching them about making smart money decisions, budgeting, planning how they use their money, so triggering conversations around money in the home is massively important and can really help.
I think the parent piece is really important, helping the
Mm.
parents have those conversations. Because I think you're right. If kids, and I don't know, I knew it, but it didn't really occur to me until you explained it that way. And we look at that data. Kids are inevitably picking this up because it's all over TikTok, it's all over Instagram, it's all over YouTube. So of course they're picking this up, and I think being able to equip parents with this is how you would have the conversation, or this is a way to approach a conversation, I think is probably the missing gap because my parents never spoke to me about money. Like, if there ever was an instance where money would come up as a conversation, it would be an argument of some kind. It will always be tied to something negative. It was never good. We never had, constructive conversations about money in any way, shape, or form. And I think that has a huge impact into how you relate to things in adulthood. So trying to get ahead of that issue itself is a big part of the wider picture.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it is heartwarming to see. I mean, I gave you some of the stats there from our research, but um, 84% of kids and teens say they would like to have more financial education in school. And 68% of 18-year-olds, so right the point where they're emerging into all the temptations of adult financial services, 68% of them are worried about leaving school without any money skills. That's a huge
Wow.
opportunity to do something and make a generational shift, really empower a
Mm,
whole generation and those coming behind them to be more confident with money, make wiser money decisions for themselves, and that will help the economy and the society just as much as it will help individuals.
yeah. So on the
Mm.
petition, I would love to get your view of how do you think it went, and are you or were you surprised at the response from the government? Because I remember sitting in the education committee meeting with all of that evidence being given. In my head, I was like, surely there has to be something they take away from this where they say, okay, maybe we can make this small thing, this small change, but they didn't. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, having given evidence and actually spoken and being
Mm.
part of like spearheading this. What were your thoughts?
Well, we launched our Make Money Count campaign around October last year, and um, I think initially um, I was thrilled. I was thrilled we got it out there. Um, we had to go through several rewordings of it to get it to make a statement that the government was happy to publish, but we did. And um, do you know what? I was surprised. First of all, let me say the results. We got over 12,500 signatures, and that's fantastic. It means because it was over 10,000, it meant that we obtained a response from the government. Um,
Hmm.
I would have loved it to go over the 100,000 signatures that are required for an open debate in
Yeah,
Parliament. That,
yeah. I want to come back to that actually in a
yeah,
minute. Really, that's another thing.
so
But
that
go on.
didn't happen. But what it did do was raise an awful lot of awareness. I mean, for one, you and I are talking, and we've started to do a few things together because we've learned that a lot of our ideas are very much aligned. We've raised awareness with a lot of members um, of the House of Lords, of the House of Commons, cross-party involvement from ministers, not shadow ministers, MPs, and that's been fantastic. And it's really raised awareness in the public. So I was pleased about that. whether this was the trigger or not, but you're quite right. I was asked to speak on behalf of GoHenry and to give evidence at the Education Select Committee's inquiry into improving financial education provision in schools. And that was, that was a huge honour. And it was quite amazing to sit there. The day that I attended, there were 4 representatives of educational establishments and groups who gave evidence. And then there were 4 of us from charities or industry who also gave evidence. And overwhelmingly, we were all giving the same message. So that committee has not yet released its findings, and we are eagerly awaiting that release. And in the meantime, we're doing all we can to raise awareness for how important this topic is, and just what a difference it could make if we, as you say, implemented what could be a fairly simple addition to the primary school curriculum.
Yeah. I know that obviously we're kind of in flux right now. It's probably a general election coming along. It's probably going to be a wide sweeping change. Do you think that that is likely to impact any motions or petitions like this in terms of the political appetite to really make this kind of fundamental change? I know it's an impossible almost question to answer, but I'd really love to get your view because, again, I'll come back to the whole 12,500 signatures in a moment. I'm thinking about this from what I hear on my YouTube, on Instagram, and just this underlying conspiracy that they're never going to do this because they want to keep everyone under the thumb. And I don't believe that to be true. I can't believe that it is true.
Do you know what? There are a lot of things in life that you could approach with it's a conspiracy. And maybe this is part of my character. For me, all that does is almost give you an excuse not to do anything. And that's not part of my character. So, no, I don't believe there's a conspiracy to keep everybody down, number one. But number two, wouldn't it be awful if that meant nobody tried anything? Nobody tried to drive change. Nobody stood up and asked to be counted. So, no, I refute that. And I think it's incumbent upon anybody who believes strongly in anything to stand up and try and make a difference. And so, in terms of whether the imminent election is affecting things, it may delay findings being released, or it may, some of the timings of things may change. But I know, we have spoken to a huge number of cross-party MPs, ministers, shadow ministers, peers. There is a lot of support for this across the political spectrum. I think it's really interesting. So Labour haven't released their full manifesto yet, but some of the papers and policies that they've released talk a lot about embedding life skills into the school educational system, into reviewing the curriculum, making sure that there are practical, applicable life skills that are being taught. And money skills is absolutely a life skill. So I find that really encouraging. And we will continue talking to all parties to try and drive this message forward.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And the fact that if you allow the conspiracy to kind of run your thinking, you're never going to do anything. I don't like that kind of conspiratorial talk, because if that is true, then you wouldn't be where you are from where you've come from, and people would just be stuck at certain phases in life. And I think there's evidence that we can see every single day of people being able to progress. I think that you have to kind of take charge of things, generally speaking, and if you don't, no one will do that for you. And I think also when it comes to this, and it's great hearing that in the conversations that you're having, there's cross-party buy-in. because I think this isn't necessarily about winning the war. It's about winning small battles along the way and little kind of like, partnerships or little things that you can develop along the way that add to this bigger picture. I think are some of the big wins that will come out further down the field, and it's not going to be one that's going to be changed within the space of a year. It's probably going to take 5-10 years maybe to really get this work through.
Yes, I think that's right, and I think no matter who leads the government after the next election, we will be there knocking on their door and continuing to speak to them about this, and I know a lot of other people will do too.
Yeah. So in terms of looking forward for this, what's on the agenda next? What are the next steps? Where's the focus going to be?
Really, it's more of the same. Keep pushing on doors, keep speaking to anybody who will listen to me, ministers, shadow ministers, people at the Treasury, educationalists. I'm not going to stop until I know that all kids in the UK are going to receive a consistent level of financial education, regardless of where they live in the UK or their socioeconomic background. And so it may sound a little bit boring, but it's more of the same.
More of the same, yeah. And I did mention, the signatures, 12,500 signatures. It was probably one of my biggest frustrations, because I cannot tell you, Louise, how many times I've been at workshops, seminars, and I quote the stat around financial habits being locked in, developed by the age of 7, and the room goes aghast. And it's like, really? And it's like, yes, we really need to do something to change this. The amount of times I've done YouTube videos and YouTube lives, and everyone is in agreement, yes, we need to change something, only for the petition to come out, and then it almost felt like crickets. Like no one really was paying attention. And I don't know, again, whether that some of that conspiratorial thinking kind of comes into it there, but I think that ultimately we need to garner further support and have more people talking about this. And I suppose the last question I'm going to ask you is, if there is one ask that you had for people watching, listening to this, what will be the one ask that you would have?
Do you know what? Because of the time that now that we're speaking about this, people are going to be seeing members of parliament or hopeful members of parliament on their doorsteps or around their town centres in the coming weeks and months. Please ask them about it. Please speak to them about what their plans are and what they can do to further the call to make sure we do teach our kids about money, and that it is mandatory in every school in the UK.
Yeah, I think that's a great ask, actually, because they're going to be out and about looking for your vote. So if you mention something and it's not on the agenda, and they get as many people asking about the same thing or something along the same lines, they're going to quickly start to figure out, hang on a second, maybe we do need to have this on our agenda in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's a really, really good ask. I want to say thank you for your time, because I know that you're really, really busy, to have a conversation with me today. And it's really been a pleasure working on the petition and everything with you. And I hope we can continue to do something of some kind moving forward. But like I said, a big, big thank you for letting me play a part in the entire process.
Your support has been really appreciated. And yes, let's keep on banging that drum.
Thank you, Louise. So if you are watching this or you're listening to this on Spotify, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you picked up something. I think my final words, if I were to have any, would be, please don't allow yourself to be caught up in this conspiratorial thinking. I've heard so much of it, it makes my blood boil, if I'm completely honest. I just don't believe it to be true. I think it's defeatist. I think that if you really want something, you have to go after it, and nothing is given in life for free. And the reality is, we live in a society that has its systems, and these are old legacy systems that don't really feel fit in many ways for the modern society. And I'm not just talking education here and financial education specifically. Just look at the wider system. It feels like it isn't really fit for the modern era. And the only way that we're really going to be able to change any of this is by being proactive and by being active, and being politically active as well. This is something that a lot of people don't necessarily agree with and think it's a waste of time, but how else are you going to influence government to make change? Like, really? And I think we have a window of an opportunity right now. And this podcast is not about politics in any way, shape, or form, but politics does impact what we do with money and our choices, the things that we have to do with money. And I think in this political cycle where we are heading into a general election, being active and letting our voices be heard is very, very important to the wider cause, and just to generally just making this country a better place than what it has felt like recently. I have so many conversations and people just feel like, we're going to hell in a cart. Again, I don't necessarily believe that, but that's opinion. But that would be my one ask. Please be proactive. Please be active in the space and try and make your voice heard, be it in a small way, be it in a large way. You'll figure that out. But I appreciate you for your attention on the show and for giving me your time this week. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.